Welcome to the Triad Arts Theater here in Yelm, Washington for the who's who of the Nisqually watershed from mountain to sea.
Tonight's sponsors are Olympia Federal Savings, Keystone Masonry, Renell Funk's Allstate Insurance, Burnett Storage, the YBA, and the Triad Arts Theater.
And now, the Mayor of Yelm, J.W. Foster.
Thank you everybody for coming. Welcome to Yelm and welcome to the Triad Theater. We're here tonight to enjoy another interview about who's who in the Nisqually River watershed. And I'd like to introduce you to Steve Craig, our interviewer. Steve?
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I just came down from the hill. And you wouldn't believe who I met up there. He's referred to as the king of the hill. And it happens to be Randy King. Randy, come on out.
I'm not so sure about this king of the hill.
That's your chair over there.
Thank you.
Nisqually watershed, who's who, from mountain to sea. And I always like to mention at each of these sessions what a watershed is. Everybody know what a watershed is? It's the entire drainage of the Nisqually River. So it's all the tributary streams, Mayshell, for example, that flow into this watershed, and the main stem is the Nisqually River itself. So that's everybody who lives in this watershed. We're watershed dwellers. Well, thank you for coming. And we're going to get on with it here. All right, I'm going to be asking Randy a few questions here. And we're going to start with your early life. You're from Michigan.
In the beginning.
In the beginning, yeah.
I did. I was born and raised in Michigan and went through high school and college. Then I went to Michigan State University.
Yeah.
And I worked in state parks when I was going through college at Michigan State and spent 3 summers doing that, but I always had kind of an interest in working for either the National Park Service or the Forest Service. And just as I was graduating from college, I applied for seasonal jobs with the National Park Service, and I was hired on the northeast entrance of Yellowstone Park, which is one of the most beautiful entrance stations within the National Park Service, you know, so sometimes you just get lucky, you know, and I got lucky there, I really did. And so I worked at Yellowstone. It was my first National Park Service job right out of college. I had to leave my last final early. I had to talk my way out of that, and I did. And anyways, it kind of led to everything else that's happened since. And that was in 1977.
So that was pretty tough duty going to Yellowstone.
It was pretty tough. It really was. Yeah, I had just an incredible experience because I worked on an entrance station. So you're collecting entrance fees and campground fees at a couple of the small campgrounds that were in that area. But in the fall, I actually had a chance to do quite a bit of backcountry work as well. Trail work and stocking patrol cabins, and actually had me even out working on a boundary, doing boundary patrol in remote areas. And I liked it. And I did work with people who didn't like it. They didn't want to hike. They didn't really want to get out in the backcountry. But I mean, it's part of the Lamar Valley. I think for those of you that have been to Yellowstone, it's just magnificent valley, and I was love at first sight for me, you know, I think. And then you meet wonderful people that you get a chance to work with, and you know, it's an incredible mission to be part of. And I ended up working seasonally for 6 years, so it's never been very easy, I think, to get a permanent job in the National Park Service. It's still not. It's very difficult to describe to someone how you get from here to there. It's not always a straight line. I had to go work for another agency to get career status to be able to apply for permanent jobs with the National Park Service. But I worked seasonally for 6 years. I worked at Yellowstone for quite a few years, but I went to Alaska. I worked at Katmai National Park in 1980, and I went to Ringo St. Elias National Park in 1981. It was the first year they hired staff after NILCA created that park and many others in Alaska, and so had some neat experiences there. Went back to Yellowstone and My first permanent job with the National Park Service, I was working as a ranger at that point, was at Olympic National Park. And so I worked at the whole rainforest for a year and measured 160 inches of rain that year, so that puts everything else in context, you know. It does rain at the Hoe. And I had a great experience there, did a lot of trail work and as well, and I really enjoyed the backcountry work. That's part of what's appealed to me. And then I went back to Yellowstone. My wife, Sally, and I got married that year, and we had met at Michigan State in college, and she was teaching in Livingston, Montana. But I went back to Yellowstone, and we got married in 1984, and I went back in a permanent position there, and we spent another 6 years at Yellowstone. And from there we went to Alaska. I had always had this dream of spending time in Alaska, and was lucky enough to realize that. It was very hard to leave Yellowstone, I will tell you that. I think I've cried every time I've left the park. You know, you leave a piece of your heart there too, but it opens up new opportunities for you, new experiences, and I've learned that. It's hard to leave, but it creates new opportunities for you as well to make new friends.
I was going to ask you about your childhood, and the reason I'm asking that question, I'm a biologist, and I spent much of my childhood in swamps, forests, lakes, and collecting pollywogs.
Sounds like fun.
And so I was connected with nature, and that's why I guess I became a biologist. I had that connection. What was your experience?
Well, I think I grew up in a relatively small town in Michigan, lived on the edge of town, and we had a little creek, and I called the Gully, and it was this kind of brush-choked creek that ran for about a mile down to a lake. And I spent a lot of time out there as a kid. You know, you build forts, and had a beagle, and we hunted rabbits, and I spent a lot of time outside. My folks both enjoyed fishing. They actually both hunted. My mother was a squirrel hunter and a deer hunter. So
Your mother?
my mother. Oh yeah, yeah, and I had aunts and other that hunted as well. So I think, you know, they also introduced me to the outdoors. You know, so I lived in a place where I could access it literally out my back door, and get into this kind of brush-choked ravine, which was kind of my world at the time, or into agricultural lands, you know, beyond there. So, and there were lakes and rivers. It was a great place to grow up. But I had that opportunity to live in a place where you had access to nature, I think, and you learned to love it, you know, and I had parents who introduced me to outdoor activities as
So
well.
that influence.
Well, very much so, you know, and I think that's what, you know, we learn about. We're trying to introduce new generations of people to our parks and public lands. We need people to use them. We need people to care for them ultimately, and to vote for them and support them politically and otherwise. And people need to be introduced to it, you know, and again, some of us are lucky enough to have parents or families or life situations where that can happen, but I think in many cases it has to be very deliberate, you know, and I think Rainier and many of the parks now are really trying to look at how can you reach out and introduce a new generation of young people to these places that really belong to them and really depend on them, I think, when you look ahead with the future as well. But yeah, so I grew up in a great place, I think.
Yeah, and this sort of reminds me, I've read several articles where there are some psychologists who refer to our young people today suffering from a nature deficit. They call it a nature deficit syndrome, and because they have no connection to nature, and without that connection, it's hard to have empathy and appreciation for nature unless somehow you're along the way introduced to it.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the case, and I think the reading takes 3 touches, you know, at a pretty early age, I think, to kind of help create that connection. So, and a lot of kids don't have it, and actually a surprising number, I think, even living in our local area. When you look at Mount Rainier, I mean, you think of all the people that can see that on a clear day, but you look out into Tacoma and Seattle and the communities that are around us, and there are probably a majority of kids that have never had a chance to get out in that park or any other place too. So it also requires, you know, you want parks in your local community. You want places people can get to. You know, you can't rely just on national parks and national forests. That's why I think, you know, the parks in your community may be the most important one to introduce someone to those kinds of places as well. So I think you can get it. You don't have to travel to a national park to have that experience. I certainly didn't, but you need to try to find opportunities to introduce people to it. There's a fear factor, I think, in anything we don't know, and you have to help people kind of overcome that. And then you realize these are really cool places, and I can have a lot of fun here. You can have some of the greatest experiences of your life. You can share that with your friends and family members. So they're these incredible assets, but again, I think people need to find someone that will help introduce them, and it may not be the parents, but maybe it's a teacher or a friend.
Well, yeah, I think you live in Eatonville,
Yep.
and I'm sure that people in Eatonville, as well as many people here in the Yelm area, may not think about it, but there's a certain quality of life when you can look out the window and see Mount Rainier, and you have the Nisqually River nearby, and lakes, and fresh air, and lack of congestion relative to maybe the experience in major cities like Seattle. So anyway, quality of life is big.
Well,
now,
I feel very fortunate to live in a small community for that reason too.
Yeah.
The other thing that you're reading right now, a lot of studies, and I think we know this intuitively, that I think most of us are happier outside in nature, but they're actually documenting a lot of really profound health benefits from people being exposed to nature, and I think we find that and we seek that, but it's one of the best prescriptions I think that you can get.
So Randy, you before you became superintendent of Mount Rainier National Park, you weren't actually here. How many years before you became superintendent were you at the park?
I came to the park in 2003, so I came as the deputy superintendent. So I had a 25-year career as a park ranger prior to that. So when I left Yellowstone, I went to Glacier Bay in Alaska for 10 years and lived there. And then I left Alaska as the chief ranger at Glacier Bay and had some incredible experiences living and working in that in Alaska. And then we went to Denver for 3 years, and I worked in a regional office as a regional chief ranger. So I had a career as a protection ranger in the Park Service for 25 years, and then Davey Baraga hired me at Rainier as the deputy superintendent, and so I came in 2003 in June, and I was in that position until Dave left and went to Grand Canyon in 2011, and I competed for the superintendent job, and I was fortunate to get it. So.
Yeah, tell me about, you did a stint in Australia.
I did.
What was that?
Oh, I forgot about that. Well, it was a work exchange with a gentleman that worked in Western Australia. It was called, and so he actually initiated it. He had made a contact with somebody that worked in the regional office in Alaska, in Anchorage, and had said, I'd really like to do an exchange with someone, and they advertised, so he talked to the right person, and they advertised an opportunity within Alaska. My superintendent at the time was supportive of us taking advantage of it, and so I applied for it and was fortunately selected. So what happened is we swapped jobs, we swapped houses, we swapped cars, we swapped clothes because we were about the same size. And so Brad Barton, he worked for the Department of Conservation and Land Management in Western Australia. And I went to work and we traded jobs for 6 months. And that was just one of the most incredible experiences. Our kids went to school. So you kind of integrated into the community in the way that you do when you're part of it. It wasn't just a visit, and so I was working. It was 6 months. It wasn't nearly long enough in a sense. And then Brad had the same kind of experience. His kids were younger, but mine was school age, and I actually went into the local school there in Australia. We were in a little town called Denham. It's near the westernmost point of Western Australia, and that park, that little district office had Shark Bay World Heritage Area, and it also administered a place called Monkey Maya, where the dolphins came in. So, and it also administered some other national park units, which were managed by the state there. But we were there for 6 months, and we made some really great friends. Their relatives became our rellies, and they've been over to visit us 2 or 3 times. I've been over, went climbing on Kilimanjaro with one of the friends we met, and they were over climbed Rainier, a bunch of them here about a couple of summers ago. So yeah, it was really an incredible experience to be able to do that.
Any kangaroos involved?
There were plenty of kangaroos around, yes, and emus, yeah. And I got a chance to get involved. they were starting to test radio tags on dugongs, and they're like a manatee. They're kind of a Indian Ocean version of a manatee, and had a chance to participate in capturing and trying out these tags to learn more about, because they're pretty threatened species in most parts of the world where they were found, and worked with some of the Aboriginal people and some veterinarians from the department. So I had some neat experiences, but a lot of what I was doing there related to what I had done in Glacier Bay, working with tour boat operators, charter boat operators. So there was actually more commonality than you might think. And they made me work. It wasn't just 6 months of running around doing fun stuff. I actually had to do some work too.
Do they have good beer down there?
I think we're doing better, to be honest with you.
Okay, I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about Yelm's connection to the park.
Yep.
Yelm's history with the park, and as you're aware, it's pretty substantial.
It is.
And Philemon Van Trump, he had to be quite an individual, and I've read a little bit about him. And for those in the audience, Philemon Van Trump lived here in Yelm. He actually was very well educated, went to New York University, and came out here as the personal secretary to the then territorial governor. And his wife happened to be the brother of that territorial governor, so the governor was his brother-in-law. But Philemon immediately became taken by Mount Rainier and said, I've got to climb it. I've got to climb Mount Rainier. And indeed he did. He became the first person to climb Mount Rainier with the son of the territorial governor, Isaac Stevens. And he then began making connections with others who would support the notion of protecting Mount Rainier National Park. And a name you may recognize is John Muir. And if you've been up to Mount Rainier, there's Camp Muir, named after John Muir, who began to correspond with Philemon Van Trump. Trump invited him to come to Yelm, and he did by train. He was actually, I believe, on his way to Alaska. And I believe at the time they thought that they were just going to head up toward Mount Rainier so that Muir could get a closer look. But what happened is he was so taken by it that they climbed it and reached the summit. And I believe that was in 1888.
That's what I recall. He got excited, is what I understood.
Yeah, he got excited. And what's interesting is they hooked up with James Longmire here, who provided the mules, and he had, I think, established a little resort operation up where Longmire happens to be within the park now. The first woman to climb Mount Rainier was Faye Fuller, who happened to be a school teacher here in Yelm, and her father owned the newspaper in Tacoma. And she was actually prompted to climb, although I don't think it required much prompting, by Philemon Van Trump. So she was the first woman to climb. So there's a lot of history here related to the park, and I should mention that when Muir and Van Trump hooked up, they began lobbying Congress to establish Mount Rainier as a national park, and they succeeded. It was in 1889 under President McKinley that it became a national park. Is it fair to say that Yelm, because of this rich history, is something of a historic gateway to Mount Rainier?
Sure. Certainly. You have one of the most magnificent views of the mountain from here. You can see why people would be tempted to climb it. If you stare at the mountain from Yelm, it's a beautiful view.
So right now, our motto is Pride of the Prairie, but when people come to Yelm, it's kind of like, where's the prairie? And but the mountain isn't going anywhere. And there's been a little bit of discussion about there are two sort of scenarios. One is it could be Pride of the Prairie, and gateway to Mount Rainier, historic gateway to Mount Rainier, or we could dispense with the Pride of the Prairie and Yelm become the historic gateway to Mount Rainier. So it's, everything starts with a conversation, and where that's going to go, who knows?
And that's up to the community.
Up to the community to decide that, and but you would certainly acknowledge that it is definitely a historic gateway.
Yeah, it's a very a deep connection. And if you want to go back further, look at the Nisqually people here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, their name for Mount Rainier was actually Mount Tahoma, right?
There are variations on it from what I've heard, like Tahoma, Tacoma, Hakopet, I mean, and other iterations of that, I think, as well.
Randy, has there been any discussion about revisiting the...
Oh, I think it comes up periodically if you read the Tacoma paper. I mean, occasionally somebody will make a run at it, I think, and I don't think it's ever gotten too far. I think Seattle's objected, in part, but in some ways, there's precedent for it. Look at Denali, what happened with that, Mount McKinley, and renamed Denali, the Athabasca name. I think there'd have to be agreement on what that name would be, and I think there's so many different variations of it. I think that could be one of the difficulties of what you do. And, we have a development outside. It's where the park administrative office is called Tahoma Woods. And Tahoma is another name, for the mountain as well. So it is, different people, and I think in Tacoma, they actually called it Mount Tacoma for many, many years, commonly in early history. But it does come up periodically. It has in my time.
Pretty quiet right at the moment.
It's pretty quiet right now. But it's both raised by, I think, people in Tacoma, but also by some of the Native Americans, some of the Indian tribes as well. Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears, I'd like to talk a little bit about the park itself. And I think that the administration is going to roll out a budget in the next couple of days, and you operate under the Department of Interior. And describe your existing budget.
Sure.
And I know there's a lot of maintenance, and we've talked in the past about a backlog. Can you talk a little bit about the budget and maintenance and
Sure.
How many employees?
Okay, we'll start with that. We have about 110 employees that work permanently at least part of the year. Some of those might just work for 8 or 9 or 10 months of the year and not 12 months. But about 110, and we probably employ another 180, maybe a few more employees, temporary employees, mostly in the summertime, but we have a few on during the winter months as well, because we have year-round operations. The park's open 365 days a year, so you always have to be open. It belongs to the people and the public, and so we operate it to provide access and services year-round as best we can. That staff is actually augmented. Last year we had over 2,100 volunteers in the park, and some of those are in for one day, and they're helping with a meadow restoration, or planting, or they might be doing trail work or a different project. But we also have people volunteering full-time, so they're an incredible part of what it takes to actually operate and care for the park right now, and play a huge part. So volunteers are a big part of what goes on there. And then we have our concessioners, the guide concessions, and the concessioner Rainier Guest Services that operates the lodging and food and dining and retail sales businesses as well. Our base budget at the park is about $12.7 million. And not all that money actually stays in the park. We actually administer some funds that are used to provide human resources and other services that benefit about 1,000 employees in this part of the state and country in Western Washington. So we actually administer the money for staff that serves many, many people beyond Mount Rainier. But about 12.7, so about 12 million that actually is focused on our operations. And each park gets an appropriation from Congress specific to that park. It's a little different funding than how the Forest Service works. So it comes to the park from Congress to operate the park, your basic operations. And then the other important fund sources, we get project money, so we compete within the National Park Service for other money that Congress sets aside for repair, rehab, cyclic maintenance, different pots of money that we compete for with projects. So they're project funding to put a roof on a building, We also compete for federal highways dollars to do major road work, and we have a construction going on now on the Nisqually Road. We're pretty close to finishing the second phase of rehabbing that entire road between the Nisqually entrance and Paradise at 17 miles. So we work very closely with the Federal Highways Administration. That's a $32 million project. And that'll be finished up this year. So we have project funding. And then the other fund source that we rely on is fees, our entrance fees. And we also get franchise fees from the concessionaires, so we collect probably about $6 million between those. Not all of it stays in the park. Entrance fees have to be used in parks where they're collected to benefit visitors directly. So you can't use it to hire permanent staff. We really use to do a lot of maintenance related projects, trail work, road work, buildings, things that can benefit visitors. 20% of that money though goes to other parks that don't have fees. So it goes right back into our national parks, and that's a very important fund source at Mount Rainier, and one we're using to accomplish a lot of work. You talked about the maintenance backlog, and so the National Park Service as a whole has about a $12 billion maintenance backlog. So there are 418 parks at this point, and they continue. The system continues to expand. We're not making more Mount Rainiers, but part of what the National Park Service does is also tell the American story. And so, history continues to be made. The American story is still being written, and it's being expanded to be more inclusive as well. So, there are more historical sites that are being added to the National Park Service over time as well. But Mount Rainier has over $1 billion worth of infrastructure. You think about it, it was the 5th national park, and people have been building things there ever since. And so between the road system, the buildings, the utilities, the trail system, the current replacement value of everything in the park is about $1.2 billion or more in the park. And so our maintenance backlog at the park is almost $300 million. And I think we're making some progress on that. The road work actually road projects represent about 3/4 of that need. So I think as we address the road projects in particular, we're making progress on some of that maintenance backlog. But what maintenance backlog is money that you should have been spending to take care of your assets in the park and keep them in good condition. So it just shows that you're behind. And that's just an indication. I think when you have a $12 billion maintenance backlog for the service, and we have a $275 to $300 million backlog at Rainier's, we're not as a country putting enough money in to keep up with it. So I think that's been a bit of the challenge, but it's not a new challenge. And part of what's happening, I think we've got a better handle on what we actually have out there in the parks than we've ever had before, and we have good condition assessments too. But again, we have some great projects I think in queue with road work, and one we're trying to get funded this year is a Paradise Inn Annex. So there's been a substantial investment at Paradise over the last 15 years to try to restore that historic district, including Paradise Inn, built the new visitor center, took down the old one, worked in the guide house, and the last remaining major piece up at Paradise for restoration is the 1920 annex, which is the 79 rooms that are attached to the Paradise Inn in the backs. And that is a project that's desperately needed to rehab that structure, and we're hoping to award a contract this year for that. So, yeah.
You were also mentioning that with the new federal budget and more attention being paid to infrastructure, that you're kind of hopeful that some of that infrastructure funding might be directed your way.
Well, and our new Secretary of Interior, Secretary Zinke, in his confirmation hearings and even since then with some of the news releases, is really focused on that maintenance backlog in the national parks and is wanting to make that a priority as a country to try to address that, make some progress on that. So, we would certainly welcome that opportunity, and I think to try to get our parks in better shape so we can pass them on to the next generation.
How soon would you know?
Well, it's all tied up in the the appropriation process, which Congress controls, and the proposals will go forward in the fiscal year 18 budget, 2018 budget. The federal fiscal year operates October through September. So right now, the president and the administration are proposing their budget for 2018.
Right.
We're operating on a continuing resolution for 2017 right now. So we're still awaiting a final budget for this fiscal year, but that should be forthcoming by the end of April, I think, is when we could expect
So
to see that.
maybe a few months before you have any understanding of,
Yeah, and it'll depend on Congress. There's a lot of debate on what the priorities are and what they should be, obviously, and there's a tremendous number of needs in the country, and the parks are just one of those in there. But I think the fact that its infrastructure has been highlighted, and I think the fact that our new secretary is making it, is talking about it directly, I think, is promising, because again, it's an investment in the future. These places have been passed on to us by the people before us, and it's our job to care for them now and pass them on to
he's
those
from
who come
Montana.
after. He's from Montana, yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask you, describe a typical day being superintendent of Mount Rainier now. Is there a typical day?
Oh, yeah, it is, but it's not as interesting as one would think, There's an expectation that you're out in the park every day, but mostly I'm in meetings, on a phone, I'm at a desk, and that's how you help the park, I think, when you're by and large. I think the superintendent, you work with a lot of different people, and you work with a management team in the park, but you work with so many different partners as well that are part of taking care of the park. So I think the big part of what you're always doing is coordinating and working with others, either in the park or out, and trying to build relationships in ways that help the park as well. So I spend a lot of time talking to people. I spend a lot of time, and then, this time of the year we're doing a lot of work on trying to do our hiring, get our projects lined out, figure out what our funding is, look at what our operations are going to be for the coming summer. So it's kind of continuous, and in the meantime you're operating and things are happening. You have big storms and you can't open the gate, and you have a lot of snow to remove, and things break, and there's the day-to-day things that go on in a park, so you respond to those, and again, try to keep the park open so the public can use it and enjoy it.
So you're basically gearing up for the spring, summer season. What's happening up there this summer, Ray?
Summer's coming.
Huh?
Summer's coming.
Hopefully.
We have a lot of snow on the ground. We
I'm
have,
not holding my breath.
might be a little late for the flowers to poke out this year. I think we had 174 inches at Paradise last week, so it just depends what happens the next 2 or 3 months, but we get a lot of snow in the spring, so this is not atypical. But summer will come and we'll operate and hopefully provide a great experience for folks. We had a very busy year last year, a lot of publicity about the National Park Service Centennial. It was kind of hard to ignore. But a lot of marketing of the parks, and I think we saw that in the visitation at Rainier. We had high recreation visit numbers, and I think with the National Park Service as a whole, I had a record in visitation. So I think the good news, people are enjoying their parks, and they're coming, and I think becoming aware of that as well. I think the challenge for us is making sure they don't all show up on the same weekend in August. We had a line at the Nisqually entrance this year that was the longest any of us have experienced, certainly myself, but others that have been at the park for much longer than myself. It was one Saturday at the end of July, it was about 3.5 miles long. It was a 2-hour wait, so it's not the kind of experience you want people to have. So I think part of the challenge at Mount Rainier, and it's not a new problem, in the sense, in the 1920s they were talking about congestion and the need to, that's part of why Sunrise was developed, was to create other areas. And I think the park was developed to create multiple places for people to go and not concentrate use in one area. It's been complicated by the history of the park because we've lost road access at Carbon River, and we've lost road access up the West Side Road, and so part of that's just the dynamic nature of what's going on around the mountain right now. But we'll operate. I expect the interest in the parks to continue. Weather drives so much of what happens. About 60% of our visitation at the park is local. So part of what we did last year after the busy weekends is we tried to get good information out on our social media. We did a news release say if you have a choice, if you're local, please come during the week. Come early, come late. If you show up on a Saturday, 1 o'clock, expect to wait. And I think it did help. I think the word got out. Because you don't want people to have that kind of experience to sit in line. But we're operating, I think our summer operation is pretty well set in the sense of the seasonality of it, because our road crew right now is just starting to plow and operate We start plowing the open roads right now. They're on West Side Road right now. And it started in March, and we're still plowing snow into July to get roads open so that people can actually access them in the summer. So they'll go on Stevens Canyon Road and work on the east side. We work with WSDOT, they're a partner, and they plow 410 and 123 to help out the park. But then to get to Sunrise, their goal is to have access to Sunrise by the end of June, 4th of July at the latest. But it depends on what kind of snow levels you have. But it takes a lot of work just to get the park open for summer, so that's really what we're focused on now. And then you're hiring staff, you're opening up buildings, you have to reactivate utility systems. All the park basically is mothballed and shut down for the winter, other than that corridor to Paradise, and then Carbon River Ranger Station is open year round as well.
Now, you're averaging over 1 million visitors a year, right?
Mm-hmm. We had 1.35 million recreation visitors last year, and just under 2 million altogether. We count people that are driving through on 123, 410, about half of those would count as recreation visitors and the others. So just under 2 million people altogether, but not all of them. Some were traveling through the park. But yeah, we had high visitation last year.
So some of those visitors are probably coming through Yelm.
They should be.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Entrance fees. Are they stable, or do you anticipate the entrance, what is the current entrance fee?
The entrance fee last year went to $25, so we went through a public process a couple of years ago. It wasn't unique to Rainier. Parks around the National Park Service did this and looked at the fee structure because there was a lot of inconsistency across from park to park to park based on the way those fees have been developed over time. And so there was an effort to try to get them aligned. And there's also, frankly, an effort, I think, to try to raise more fee dollars because they're so important to actually carrying through the parks.
Now, that's $25 for a carload?
That's for a carload, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's good for 7 days. So, many people are coming in for the day. But if you come to stay, at some of the lodging or one of the campgrounds, or you're going to go for a backcountry hike,
Yeah.
it's good for 7 days.
So it's for the car. So if there's just a driver in a car, that's $25.
It is, yeah, it's based on the vehicle. And so if you've got a car load of people, everyone's covered with that as well. It is. So our rates went up. They were at $15, and so we looked at phasing it in. We went from 15 to 20 in 2015. Last year I went from 20 to 25, which is what we communicated to the public. And I know our entrance folks were very concerned about that, but we had very few, to almost no complaints about that. I think people understandably don't want to see entrance fees become a barrier to people visiting their parks, and I don't think any of us want to see that. But it's also money that's used directly in those parks to care for them. It goes right back, and it's a really important fund source for the National Park Service right now. It's a very important fund source in Mount Rainier. I think we've had good acceptance because they've been collecting fees at Mount Rainier since 1908. Oscar Brown took your fee when you came in. That was the first park to admit automobiles at the Nisqually entrance. And so fees, I think people are accustomed to paying fees, but I also think we've had good public support because people realize the money's going right back into the park. It's not going to the general treasury, it's not going anyplace else, and it has to be used on things that directly benefit visitors. So we're using it, rehab trails, rehab campgrounds, picnic areas. We're using it for the Nisqually Road project, putting new utilities in, and we couldn't do that work without the fee dollars. So it's very important to the parks.
Probably one of the best deals in the entire United States is when you reach age, is it 62?
62, yeah.
62
Yeah.
for, is it $12?
Well,
$20?
it's been $10 and it still is,
10?
but that rate will go up to $80 and that's for a lifetime pass. So it's called the senior pass.
It's going to go from 10 to 80?
It's going to go from 10 until 80. So there was legislation passed at the end in December of this past year called the Centennial Act. And part of what that did, Congress passed it, President Obama signed it, but it's actually enabling some of that money in the senior pass to be used to create an endowment for the National Park Foundation. And it's also creating a pot of money called the Centennial Challenge Funds so that you can match $15 to $25 million in private donations. So you can immediately leverage that money 100%. And we have projects at Mount Rainier right now that we think are going to compete for that. So part of that $80 and that increase in that senior pass in particular is earmarked not to stay in the parks, but to create these pots of monies that can be used then to leverage public fee dollars with donations, private donations.
Is that in effect now?
We have not gone to the 80 as of yet.
When?
In 2017 at some point, but I haven't got a date. And I was trying to figure that out in my car out here.
Does everybody know about the senior pass?
It's a lifetime pass, you know.
Grandfathered in at 10 bucks?
Right now, it's still 10, yes,
And,
Is it grandfathered in
yes.
forever?
So you can get there soon,
and with that,
yeah.
and with that pass, you go to any national park in the United States.
Yeah, it's good for 2,000 federal fee areas, you know, not just parks, but fish and wildlife refuges, forest service areas, etc. It's the best deal of government, Steve indicates.
It is. Even $80 is a
Yeah.
deal. It's free park access.
And that's the cost of an annual pass if you're not eligible for the senior pass.
Okay.
You have to be a U.S. citizen, 62 or older. But it's $80 for America the Beautiful pass. It does the same thing, you know, for all the, and that's good value as well. And again, it really helps the parks.
Absolutely. What are the most popular activities? Do most people go to the park just to decompress? They get up there and they just want to decompress and
Oh, I think so. I mean, it's-
relax.
you know, I think
Or
peop-
are there specific things that seem to be big attractions up there? In other words, what are sort of the top two or three
Well,
attractions?
I think if you look at the areas that attract most of the use, it's Paradise and Sunrise.
Yeah.
Again, Sunrise has a relatively short operating season because it's at 6,000 feet and the snowfall, you know, so it operates basically July through into mid-October, you know, typically. Maybe sometimes towards the end of October, but the storm can shut you down pretty quick there. So it's a pretty short season at Sunrise. We maintain access to Paradise year-round. We spend $1 million just moving snow in the park.
Wow.
And that's to create access to Paradise year-round and try to sustain that. And we get a lot of winter use and recreation. People have a lot of fun. But it's also to do that snow removal to get the park open in the spring so you can actually get to Sunrise by July and not wait for the snow to melt in August in some years.
Things are changing in the park. The glacier. The Nisqually Glacier has retreated substantially over the last several decades. What's happening currently? Is the melting accelerating, or what? Give us the latest.
So Nisqually's been pretty closely studied since at least the 1930s, and the Glacier View Bridge that you drive on the way to Paradise, you know, the historic photos, the glacier was all the way down there when the park was created in 1899. Since that time, it's retreated, you know, well over a mile. But we have resource management and scientists that study the glacier every year, and so the Nisqually is monitored every year. And they're doing mass balance measurements. They use like a sonar type material, and they'll actually use a steam drill and put stakes in, and it gets a sense of how much snow accumulated, and did it create ice, and how much do you lose each year? And so are you gaining or are you losing? So, you know, glaciers both ebb and flow. You know, they can retreat or they can advance. The Nisqually is retreating, and in the last 15 years, the amount of ice loss has dramatically increased over what we have seen, you know, since it's been monitored, you know, for the last, you know, 80 or so years. So the rate of ice loss is dramatically increased, and that's just looking at the thickness of the ice, you know, not so much necessarily the snout retreating that much further or that much rapidly, but overall mass of ice out there. So, you know, we're seeing a much higher rate of loss than we have seen in previous years in looking at that information.
Even with the great snowfall.
Yeah, and again, it fluctuates a bit, but we're looking at the lower part of the Nisqually Glacier there, you know, below the route to Camp Muir is primarily where the monitoring is going. Emmons Glacier is pretty closely monitored on the Wet River Sunrise side as well. But I think, you know, the Nisqually Glacier again has a southern aspect. It's on that side of the mountain. I don't think we're seeing quite the same changeover in carbon, but we're also not monitoring it in the same way as well.
Mount Rainier is a stratovolcano, and it's believed to be the most dangerous volcano in at least the lower 48, if not the entire North American continent. There's some monitoring going on up there on a continuing basis. Could you describe what's
Sure.
happening?
We work very closely with the USGS. They have the volcano observatory, Cascade Volcano Observatory, based out of Vancouver, Washington. And USGS has been monitoring it with seismographs. They're monitoring seismic activity on the mountain, it's affiliated with the volcano. But they've also installed some other monitoring stations within the last 10 years in different places. And it's really enabling them to get really minute changes in deformation of the mountain, so that if part of the mountain starts to grow or shift, they can use these monitoring sites around the mountain to actually get a sense of what's happening out there. So USGS is watching it in part because of that risk, potential risk to the public, and there are 4 million people living in Puget Sound region, and probably 1 million or more, probably downstream of it, so to speak, within fairly ready reach. So I think something you pay attention to. I do think there's equipment up there that would indicate if we had unusual seismic activity or any deformation. I think there's enough information where you'd have some heads up on that. The other hazards that have occurred on the mountain in the past would be the geohazards like the lahars. Everything's built on Mount Rainier. And so if you were to have, part of the mountain collapse in kind of a catastrophic event, that's a whole different kind of mechanism, if you will. But there's monitoring in Pierce County, and even to try to help give at least some advance notification before that would happen. But it's a volcano. I mean, it is. I've been to the top, and you go up on the crater, and the first time I got up there, and the ground is steaming and it's hot, and I had this kind of remarkable epiphany. It's like, holy cow, this is a volcano. It's like, it's a volcano when you get up there and the ground's hot, at 14,000 feet, it's a volcano, yeah.
But it's pretty quiet at the moment.
Yeah, it's active. I think the fact that Columbia Crest crater, by and large, there's heat emanating, so it's nothing dramatic is happening that I'm aware of. So I'm not going to worry here.
I presume the people in Vancouver would
Yeah.
be giving you a call.
Well, they would, yes.
And have you gotten any calls in the last, say, 12 to 18 months that said, hey?
No, but when there's a significant seismic event, then normally we get some notification of it, and other people pay attention to that as well.
A seismic event at the mountain?
Yeah, I mean,
In
not,
the Puget Sound Basin?
well, more significant than the normal. There's a lot of rumbling going on constantly, almost continuously. So low frequency, and even the glaciers moving on the mountain can trigger that seismic activity as well. So, it can come from a number of different sources, but if it's anything beyond kind of the usual rumbling that goes on, generally we'll get some kind of a notification. In my time there, I can't say that I've felt, in Eatonville, even where I live, I thought I felt something last night. Sometimes it's Fort Lewis, I don't know.
You felt something last night?
Well, I felt the house rattle a little bit, so very, very seldom. I think I might be oblivious, I maybe miss these things too, when things are rattling, but, nothing too severe has happened during my time there.
There's a lot of wildlife up there on the mountain, and recently you reintroduced the fisher,
Yep.
which is in the weasel family, I believe.
Yep.
And how many did you release?
Well, it's been released, the releases occurred over 2 years, and most of them have actually gone on the Forest Service at Cistus Learning Center on the Gifford Pin Show. So it's part of the reintroductions, and I really give the state credit. There's a lot of different partners in the reintroduction. The state's really taken the lead on this. So they were reintroduced in Olympic Peninsula previously, and right now they're looking at reintroducing to the Cascades, and we're in the southern reintroduction, and then they're going to move from here to go to the North Cascades, because it's all suitable habitat for the animals. So there have been, over the last 2 years, I think between 40 and 45, about 43 I think have been released in the southern Cascades. And we had 2 releases in the park this year in December, really cool, and the Nisqually tribe helped host the first release, and it was a really neat event. We probably had about 100 people. We'd also invited, and the Nisqually tribe had helped us and invited the First Nation people from British Columbia. And so these are the places the animals are coming from. So they're being live trapped in British Columbia and then brought to, including the ones at Olympic National Park, and brought from Canada here. And so we invited the First Nation people that were involved in this project and have helped support it to be part of the release, and the Nisqually tribe was there and had a chance to do some songs and actually make a real ceremony out of releasing these animals back and reintroducing them back into a place where they belong. You know, they were animals that were here. They're part of what should be in the park, and we still have the habitat to do it, and they just needed some help. But we had a really cool event there, and had a bunch of kids taking part in that as well, and then we did another one closer towards Christmas then as well.
So that was really, so far, very successful.
Well, it has been, and I think, you know, there have been a few mortalities with the animals released, but, you know, that happens in nature, whether they're killed by bobcats or coyotes, or, you know, they have predators as well. But I think the animals are still out there and they're ranging. I think one of the animals released last year at Siskiyou went all the way to Snoqualmie. You know, we had a sighting, so they all have radio, they're implants, actually. So that's one of the things that happens. They all get little transmitters. And so they're tracking them, you know, right now. And so, yeah, I think the habitat's there, and I think very encouraging.
From Siskiyou to Snoqualmie?
Yeah.
They had to cross a lot of roadways.
They do, yeah. So they're wide-ranging, and there were white paths on the other side, and I don't have a good feeling for where the animals that were released at Longmire this year, just where they've ended up, but you know, they'll fly and do aerial flights to try to get tracking data on the animals to track them over time. But, no, I think that the Olympic Peninsula, my sense is that it's worked well, and I think that we wouldn't be reintroducing them unless we felt there was a chance of success and the habitat was there. And, you know, so a lot of people have been involved with this project, and it's a real good news story, actually.
Well, this might even be a bigger news story, is based on that success and the fact that, of course, you like to have the most incredible experience in the park possible. There's a rumor that you're going to introduce grizzly bears. Is that true? Or is that just a rumor?
I tell people we have grizzly bears now. Yeah.
Well,
if you go to Paradise, you can see
the source of this rumor.
They're about this long, and they look just like grizzly bears in arms. But I call them outright grizzly bears because I work in Yellowstone for many years, and I've been around a lot of grizzly bears, and they look like a grizzly bear. They don't act quite like a grizzly bear. There's no intent of reintroducing actual grizzly bears at Mount Rainier. They're looking at the North Cascades ecosystem. It's about almost 10,000 square miles of potential habitat there. And so North Cascades, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, you know, are taking a lead on that reintroduction, but really no serious discussion about doing that at Rainier. It would be too small, you know, Rainier in and of itself.
It certainly expands the excitement factor in the park.
You know, I've worked a lot of years around bears and
in Yellowstone.
In Yellowstone, yeah. I actually worked with bears a lot when I was there. I was a ranger, you know, during that time, and managed a lot of bear jams, but, you know, dealt with bears in different scenarios, and then at Glacier Bay in Alaska for 10 years, and they're a part of life. And I actually, my personal view on it is that, not only from an ecosystem standpoint, but they really do add something to the experience. I mean, they do. I think you, in a sense, they heighten your awareness in a way I think that doesn't exist otherwise. Just knowing that they're there. You should pay attention. But for all the years, you know, that I worked in and around these animals, you know, I had really very few, only one or two encounters with them, and a couple of those because I was looking for them. You know, so you put yourself in a scenario where you're trying to dart an animal in a residential area or something like that. But you're lucky if you see them, you know, and so I think they actually add to the human experience.
But I mean, you do have a population of black bears in the park.
We do, yeah.
How many?
I don't have a good feeling for numbers. You can find them if you know where to look for them. Early spring, some of the avalanche chutes, Stevens Canyon Road, good place to look. And then in the fall, when the berries, in the late summer and fall, you can find them in the subalpine areas. I just think of myself as being lucky when I see them. I think I saw 2 bears in the park last year. And I get out a fair amount, so you don't see them as commonly as you would, but there are times of the year and in places I think where you can
What about
find
big
them.
cats?
Mountain lions are there, bobcats are there. I have not seen a mountain lion. I'd love to. And I've worked.
You see bobcat?
I have seen a bobcat. Yes. Yeah.
But they're not like,
No, you're lucky if
wandering
you
around.
see them. It's the same
parking
thing with the
lot
lions.
there,
People
yeah.
do see them occasionally, but they have such large home range and they're very secretive. And even at Yellowstone, I actually helped biologists collar lions there. And I lived in and around Yellowstone for 11 years, and you'd see tracks. I saw one in all my years that ran across the road in front of me. So you can be, and we live around them here, and you're lucky if you see one.
describe, when I've been to Paradise, there are these fox
Yep.
that hang out there, and they've got their plan kind of worked out in terms of making a living in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Can you describe what they do?
They're called a Cascade red fox,
Yeah.
and they're actually a unique subspecies. It's only found Rainier, Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens area.
Yeah.
And so they're actually a species of concern. They are distinct and different from
God.
It's a grizzly.
Boy, when you start
among
talking
winter
about the fox,
grizzlies. The fox, and so we've had an issue with people feeding them in the parking lots. We have not had that problem the last couple of years,
Yeah.
and we're not quite sure why. We're not seeing the animals. We've had researchers in the summers trying to determine just what's going on with that population, because it is a relatively distinct and small group of animals, not only in the park, but in the area, in the region. And so there is a concern that, maybe there's something going on with that population that's not healthy. So we just haven't had them. We had begging animals, in the parking lot, and they've been at Longmire in the past. And they're always discouraged that in the parks because the animals generally pay a price, whether they're birds or animals. They get hit by cars, they hang around the roads, or they're eating junk food that's not any healthier for them than it is for us.
what's the raven population like up there? They're-
Ravens are around, yeah.
Have they worked out a relationship with humans up there?
Well, again, I think primarily in the campgrounds and picnic areas, I think would be, I don't think we have, gray jays can be an issue, the golden male ground squirrels, so, you can have it with rodents as well. I think, again, it's part of it, you just try to help people and educate them why it's important to put your food away and not create those habits in wildlife that, create problems. So part of what, we have a campaign in the park called Keep Wildlife Wild, and I think that's the idea is, to really discourage that kind of behavior.
You were talking about Native Americans, and I assume that the park service has a relationship, and there are multiple tribes around the mountain. Kind of describe your relationship
Sure.
with Native Americans and.
Well, we work closely with the affiliated tribes, and there are 5 of them, and we include the Nisqually here. The Nisqually have been a great partner, and a lot of admiration for what they're doing in the watershed as a whole in terms of restoring the watershed and trying to enhance salmon restoration, etc. And they've been real leaders in that. So we've worked closely with them, probably in particular with the Nisqually. I've had a really a good relationship. The Muckleshoot, Puyallup, Yakima, Confederate tribes of Yakima, and Cowlitz and Squaxin Island. Those are the affiliated tribes. We normally host a meeting with the tribes in May, and just to give a chance to talk about what's going on in the park. There's a new plant gathering regulation that's passed this past year, and we're going to try to figure out what that means. So it allows Native people to actually do some gathering of their traditional plants in a way that's not having an adverse impact on those resources in the park as well. So we work with the tribes there. We've actually worked with the Nisqually tribe and created a tribal designated use area in the historic campground at Longmire, as a place to bring young people and try to sustain their culture. I think the parks have a role in trying to help, Native people sustain their cultures. Part of that's introducing young people, getting them engaged in these places, that they have a history in. There's been great archaeological work in conjunction with the tribes in the park, and we've taken human history back 8,500 to 9,000 years. People have been using that landscape for a long time, and they're part of it. And the tribes, that are here are the people that are here today.
They still do a little bit of gathering of berries and.
We've worked with the Nisqually in particular. It's been a complicated issue in parks, because the regulations hadn't really permitted that, or made exceptions for it. In Alaska it does, but not in the parks in the lower 48. And so we've actually worked very closely with the Nisqually on a research project. We had a PhD grad student working with the Nisqually to actually go out and document what they were doing in beargrass and a couple of other species that they were gathering, how they did it, and then how did the plants respond. And so, from that we've been able to document, that it really has minimal impact, in some cases can stimulate growth. So, but that's the kind of analysis I think we need to do to show that these kinds of activities, if they're done on a lower scale, can be done and be compatible. But that's the kind of analysis that's going to be required as we start getting into that with some of the other tribes as well. In the park is one of the last places where some of these plants can be found in some cases as well. So we're not talking about threatened endangered species or anything like that.
Okay, I'm going to kind of go out on the edge here a little bit. There's some folks out there just outside the park who believe that they have that there's Sasquatch in the area. Have you heard anything?
I haven't seen
Have you
it.
established a relationship with these?
I have
These
not
creatures.
personally. No, I have not personally.
No.
You talk to people that have seen things that they can't explain, so,
That has occurred.
well, it has occurred to other people. It is not to myself.
Not to yourself. No personal.
No, and I spend a lot of time out. I'm always attuned to tracks and animal tracks, and I don't know. I don't have any personal experience with that. No, I don't.
Well, as you know, in 1947, there was a gentleman flying over Mount Rainier and saw a group of UFOs, and that whole term sort of was coined after that sighting in 1947. Have you seen anything lately up there?
I see a lot of lenticular clouds over the mountain.
Are those
That means it's very windy up there. But that's all I've seen.
Okay,
yes.
but those are not motherships.
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
They look like clouds to me.
All right, why don't we take a quick break here and then open it up to questions in the audience if you're interested. A very quick break.
Okay. Good, thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Yes, use restroom. Or if you have a loud voice.
Folks can hear.
Are there any more trails going to be open to horses, mules, in Mount Rainier? Right now, there's only one called the Laughing Water Trail up in 410.
Yep.
It's sad that only one trail available for horses. I know some history of why that occurred, but that's behind. Since there have been historic uses of mules and horses in the park from way back when, there seems to be, should be a need for more trails available to horses, mules, and not just hikers.
Okay. It's a good question, and it's a timely one. The park is right now updating its wilderness stewardship plan. And so last year we had a number of public scoping sessions just to go out and talk about what the plan might include, what are some of the things we might be addressing with that. And Backcountry Horsemen was well represented at those meetings. So we were in Seattle and Tacoma, a couple of other places as well. And that was just a scoping process. So we're actually doing an environmental impact statement, and we're developing alternatives. And we have, so we'll be going out for public comment. But the Backcountry Horsemen have also submitted some ideas on places they think could be opened up for stock use as well. Because you're right now, the Laughing Water Trail and the PCT along the east side of the park, which is in and out of the park in places, are the only places right now stock or use are. So we're looking at it. I think this is the time to actually talk about places where they could be accommodated. I've talked to one individual who was very adamant about being able to ride horses in Paradise and saying, I can't do that. Because, we're dealing with congestion issues up there right now. I don't know where you park, and just the amount of use that's occurring on those trails with people right now, it's just not a mix that would make sense. And so I'm trying to be pretty upfront about what I think is a good idea and reasonable and what's not. And again, I don't know how we could accommodate it in places where we have such high density, pedestrian use right now in a place like Paradise or even right at the Sunrise area. But I think there are other places we can look at in the park. And then I think the other part is, do you have the infrastructure in place to actually support stock use? Because right now the trails are designed and maintained to accommodate foot traffic. So you may have a bridge that's a foot long, but it's not going to be adequate for stock. So some of it's looking at where could you do that. And backcountry horsemen, to their credit, have offered to do trail maintenance. So if you give us more options, we're looking at some old historic trails that are no longer maintained, so there may be some places. So, I'm open to it, I think in terms of looking, but I think it's looking at where could it be compatible, where are there opportunities where you're not creating a conflict with heavy use in other parts of the park that are already occurring, where we already have congestion-related issues we're trying to address. So, I don't know. So I think I'd say weigh in, and think about the trails where you think it makes sense, that could accommodate that based on their location and the kind of condition. We have like the West Side Road could be a good example. Right now, the first 3 miles are open to public vehicle traffic, and then the Homa Creek took out the road. And we keep scratching out an administrative access to maintain access to the upper 9 miles or 8 miles of road. But there's some great trailheads in that too, and I think we can promote bicycle use out there more and try to get more people into that part of it. But that might be a place too. You better work
I
with
wrote
that.
from Puyallup to Mowich Carbon River Campground. This was in 1962,
Yeah.
for a while. And went up to Mowich Lake. The Round the Mountain Trail was still available,
Yeah.
and now all that's been,
Yeah. I think part of what happened in the park's general management plan that was written, it's been 15 plus years ago now, and that's where the decision was made not to permit stock use. And I think what had happened, and you know the history probably better than I do, but there was a diminishing amount of use and interest in it. And I would say the stock people didn't really weigh in on that planning effort and expressed, didn't get engaged with it. But backcountry horsemen are engaged now, and I think this, as we look at a new wilderness plan, most of the park is wilderness, 97% of it, everything off the road basically. This is the time to reconsider that. So when we go out for public comment, I think that's the important time to provide your comments. And we already have some comments and ideas from backcountry horsemen that the park staff are looking at and incorporating into some of the alternatives that could be considered. But you'll want to weigh in when we actually go out for public comment on that.
I should mention that this session is being recorded and will be televised on public access TV out of Olympia. And so if you're Comcast, and I'm not quite certain how that is distributed, but if you could come to the microphone so we can capture your question, that would be good.
And Steve, move the microphone back where you had it.
Pardon?
Move the microphone back over there, because it's the stand and the microphone where it was before, when you moved it.
Right here?
Yeah, because you're blocking you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's next?
Hi.
Hi.
Let's make sure it's on.
No. Oh, here.
There.
Hello. Okay.
Awesome.
I want to apologize ahead of time for this subject I'm going to bring up, and I mean no disrespect to you, but you're probably aware of the books and the documentaries by David Paulides about missing persons in the National Park Service.
I've heard of them, but have not not familiar with them.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're not familiar with them, it's introduced kind of a very controversial and disturbing aspect to the whole picture of the national park system and people's relationship with them, because he claims that there are an untoward number of people that disappear when they visit national parks and under mysterious circumstances, almost bordering on the realm of the paranormal, and also that the Park Service, he seems to imply that the Park Service is complicit in some kind of a cover-up. But you don't know anything about it.
Well, I can assure you there's no cover-up.
Sure.
You know, I think any time a person goes missing, you know, when we're made aware of it, you know, we're looking for those folks.
Mhm.
And, you know, Mount Rainier as an example, there are people that have never been found. And there's a lot of places to get lost at Mount Rainier where you aren't going to be found, you know, or they might be in a mountaineering accident, you know, in a crevasse or in a glacier, you know, people have been buried. We know about some of those,
Mhm.
you know, but there have been some cases where people have disappeared and not been found, but it's not hard to imagine how that happens in a park, you know, in these wild places where you can get hurt in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you know, you get off a trail and you're going places that probably no one has seen, you know, for who knows how long. So I understand that, but no, there's, you know, I can assure there's no conspiracy to try to hide that, you know, hide any information about people disappearing. But do people get lost in parks and never get found? Yes. It's the nature of wild places, I think, and it happens outside parks as well.
Yeah, I was just, I thought about that, and there are probably more people who disappeared in Seattle last week than,
Okay.
if you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
But it does happen. It has happened at Rainier, and we had, you know, just a couple of years, 3-4 years ago, we had a, you know, a man and his son were hiking, and they were trying to cross and hand off keys, and they were hiking between Box Canyon and Summerland, and we launched a big search. The man didn't show up, the son did. So they parked cars on both ends. It's like a 20-mile stretch, and so they met in the middle, traded car keys, and we're gonna go, you know, drive their respective cars, and the father never showed up. And we launched the search, and we worked with Mountain Rescue, and we have lots of people out looking around and flying. Never found them, never found the guy. 2 years later, then other hikers are out, you know, up above Summerland someplace, and they stumble upon this person's remains, you know. And so, but sometimes it happens and you don't find them, you know. There's just a lot of places you can get lost. Yeah.
Yeah. Polite's criticism of the Park Service is that the Park Service does not maintain a log of missing persons. That's true, isn't it?
You know, we actually have a list of all the fatalities that have occurred at the park. You know, that people can go and see. It's not nothing you necessarily want to encourage, you know, or publicize, but you know, I think of the people that have died in the park, we have that kind of information. I'm not sure if there's any kind of a footnote whether or not they've been recovered or not, but you know, there were airplane accidents, and there was a horrible tragedy with the Marines, you know, and there were 32, you know, men that died up there that have not been recovered. So, you know, you have those kinds of events that do happen and have happened, and you know, happening here in other parks. But yeah, so whether or not there's a good documentation, I think a lot of the incident reports, you know, in the Park Service, I think they're by and large centralized now, but you know, probably in early years, each park would keep its incident reports, you know, and so I think the information is probably available. Whether or not it's available in a readily searched format, you know, from many years ago, it probably doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Not a pleasant subject, but it is a part of the subculture that's kind of boiling off on the side.
No, that's interesting. Thank you. I haven't heard. I usually try to be attuned to some of that stuff.
Yeah,
and I haven't followed that. So
yeah, it's 411. I think David Politis, and he's done about a half a dozen books, and has recently done a documentary.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Any hands out there? Mr. Mayor? Or just JW?
Randy, you mentioned earlier the National Park Foundation. With the federal funding always in question and the fees structure maybe not being sufficient, what does the National Park Foundation do for the parks, and what else can people do to help support the parks?
Thank you. Wonderful question. Thank you, JW. National Park Foundation is the congressionally authorized philanthropic partner for the National Park Service. So their job is to raise private donations for the national parks. And last year during the centennial, they set a goal of $350 million.
Wow.
And I think they made good progress towards that as well. So it's really just appealing to citizens to help care for their parks and their public lands. And I think personally, so the National Park Foundation is the national organization. Last year, Rainier benefited directly from them in a couple of different ways. There's a couple out of Seattle that donated $100,000 last year through the National Park Foundation to both Rainier and to Olympic National Parks. And they've committed to doing that for 10 years. And what they've enabled us to do is we're creating something called the Wonderland Trail Conservation Corps. So we're working with Washington Conservation Corps and Northwest Youth Corps to employ young people. You know, these are kind of high school to college age young people, and we're really trying to target kind of diverse youth that wouldn't necessarily have those opportunities coming out of Tacoma, Seattle areas, and that's the goal. And that went through the National Park Foundation. REI matched that last year. And so we're still working with the foundation this year to try to match that, because this couple made that commitment for 10 years. So that's really cool. Sometimes you get a donation and you can do one thing, you know, but the idea of being able to build a program like this that gets young people out doing conservation work, exposes them to a whole, really life-changing experiences, you know, that these things offer. So the foundation did that. We also had a donation from Toray Composites, which is a local company out of Frederickson. They build carbon composite, you know, that's used in aeronautical and other industries. So they're a Japanese-owned company. They donated on Earth Day $80,000 to the National Park Foundation. And I went and accepted the check on behalf of the National Park Service. Was there with someone from the National Park Foundation, but $40,000 of that came back, and then we used it at Sunrise to hire a trail crew person who worked with volunteers all summer. So we are really relying on philanthropy, I think, to a significant degree in the national parks. And I actually think, personally, I've come to believe, I think it's going to be part of how we care for our parks in the future. You know, some people can help the parks by donating. You help the park when you visit. You help the park when you pay an entrance fee. You help the park by caring, you know, I think, in voting. But donations and philanthropy are going to be, I think, part of how we care for our parks going forward. The local fundraising partner for Mount Rainier is called Washington's National Park Fund. And they also are the board and administrative structure for fundraising for Olympic and North Cascades National Parks as well. So I've spent a lot of time working with them, working with donors, and Rainier probably got about $250,000 through that fund this last year. And what we're using donations for, we're doing it things that we couldn't do otherwise, but we're really using it on our youth and education programs. Our volunteer program, where we had 2,100 volunteers last year, is largely funded through donations. We have one base funded employee that's using the appropriated funds, and the rest of it is on donations. So volunteers aren't free because you need crew leadership. You need people to lead them. We actually used part of that donation to hire a Washington Trails Association crew leader, and they've been leading almost 500 volunteers each year. You know, so for the investment of the price of a crew leader, you get WTA and its organizational structure and volunteers. So a lot of trail work's happening with donations. And search and rescue, we've had support for search and rescue as well. Citizen science, meadow restoration. So, you know, I think philanthropy is going to be part of how we care for the park. National Park Foundation is part of that, and then Washington's National Park Fund. And, you know, I think there's tremendous opportunity at a place like Mount Rainier to grow it. I was last week, I was talking to the superintendent, Grant Teton. They raised $26 million in 8 months, you know, for a capital improvement project there. $26 million.
In 6 months?
In 8 months.
Where'd that money come from?
There's a tremendous amount of wealth in the Jackson Hole area, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And,
Rockefellers,
pardon?
the Rockefellers.
Well, they created Grand Teton National Park for all practical purposes. So philanthropy has played a role in our parks from the very beginning. Acadia, Grand Teton, other parks really owe their existence to people who saw a great public purpose in these places and used their wealth to actually create places for the rest of us to enjoy. You know, I think we need to encourage that kind of behavior on our public lands in general, you know, here in the country where we can. So I'm grateful for the donors that we have, but I think there's tremendous potential in the Seattle area. When you look at the quality of life, you know, that people come here for and stay here for, they come for jobs, but they also the quality of life, you know, that we all enjoy here. You know, I think there's great opportunity to tap into that in ways that can help our public lands, including a place like Rainier. So, you know, I think Rainier ought to be able to raise millions, frankly, and we can use it to do all of those things that we can't do otherwise, and need to be doing as well. I thank you for asking that question.
Well,
Thank you.
Step forward. Sure.
Or you can remain anonymous in the back and I can't see you.
In the darkness.
Yeah.
Mr. Kenny.
Yeah, I had 3 questions, if we've got time.
Sure.
The first one was, we talked about big mammals earlier, and I was wondering if there's been any confirmed moose or wolf sightings in the park.
Not moose. Wolf sightings, you know, I've heard periodic reports of people seeing animals that they,
Just anecdotal.
pardon?
Just anecdotal.
Anecdotal,
Yeah.
yeah. Greenwater area, you know, there is a pack in Cleal up at Tiano.
Right, yeah, I've seen
So
that.
that'd be the closest, I think, that we know of. But, you know, people have reported seeing animals, you know, I think they're quite credible witnesses that potentially, but I don't know that it's anything that we can, our biologists haven't been able to probably confirm something like that.
Secondly, you talked about Cascade red foxes, and I've frequently seen those hiking about Rainier and Paradise, and even at Camp Mirror. But lately, I've been seeing them more around the Sunrise area,
Oh,
and also the Crystal Mountain ski area. So I was wondering if the Rangers have noted the same movement, or?
No, I don't know that we have. It'd be interesting to share your observations with us, to be honest with you.
And usually
We've
in the
been
spring,
concerned about not seeing them in
Right.
places we normally would, yeah.
I just got hooked up with the Cascade Carnivore Project, so.
Oh, good,
I've
yeah,
been
yeah.
tracking this.
They've been out doing scan analysis and that thing too, I
Right.
know, trying to collect that. Super. So at Crystal, did you see them? Were they habituated?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Walked within 10 feet of me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then we found 2 dens, so.
You did, okay, cool.
Hey, lastly, there were public processes about cell phone extension
Yep.
services and also backcountry camping last year, but I never found out where those went or what
Okay.
happened. So.
Well, cell phone, we're in a process of doing an environmental assessment on proposal. We have actually 3 companies now. Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T are proposing to install a cell service at Paradise. And we are required to go through an analysis when people propose that service. And so we're in the process of doing that right now. We actually went out and did a little scoping, and we had more comments on that than anything I have seen in my time at Rainier. And I think certainly we had close to 500 comments. You know, and it was a mix. People think, yeah, it'd be great, and other people say, this would be horrible. So you're probably likely to make half the people upset no matter what you do with that one. But we'll need to make a decision and recommendation. We're getting pretty close to going out with the environmental assessment on that. And then again, you have an opportunity to weigh in. And everyone has an opinion, and I get that. And I see it from both ways. I think there are probably some public safety benefits. We've lost people, I think, that maybe could have survived, you know, if they had the ability to communicate. There's some employee safety and there are other things. But then I also get, you know, there's a little bit of a refuge, you know, away from the connectivity in a place like Paradise.
Assuming that there was some kind of compromise and there was some cell phone use in the park, could it be also, for example, that, say, within the Paradise Lodge, that no cell phones? That, in other words, can you kind of...
I don't know if you could enforce it. You could request it. You know, I mean, the Paradise Dining Room, it'd be nice to have a no phone zone, you know, or the Paradise Dining Room. But, you know, to some of that, I have personal opinions as well about it. And again, I see both sides of it. I really do. I get that. but ultimately we have to make a decision on it. That'll be coming out within the next couple of months, I would expect. We're actually working fairly close to finishing, I think, the draft environmental assessment and go out to the public and get opinions. But again, the nature of that particular use is such that about half the people think it's a great idea, other people think it's terrible.
So what's the timing on likely making a decision?
I would like to see us, and actually the decision will be made by my boss, the regional director, Lauren Jaws.
By the end of the year?
Yeah, I think by the end of this year, certainly, I would hope to do that. And part of what's even enabling that service to be present is, again, we used some fee dollars this year to replace the utilities in the Nisqually Road. So the Nisqually Road project was happening. They're going to rebuild and resurface this beautiful road. It's gorgeous. But we had old utilities either on or adjacent to the road, and they were failing, both our power line, our telecommunications, so almost dysfunctional. So we spent $5 million in fee dollars, and concession franchise fees to put utility conduits in the road, and we're putting fiber optic all the way to Paradise. So the fiber optic cable is what's making it even possible for these providers to provide that kind of service. Sunrise doesn't have that. It's actually a copper telephone line laid on top of the ground that provides connection to Sunrise. So there's no possibility of doing that. But the fiber optic now, the upgraded utility system is what's even making it feasible for the telecom providers. And then the last question was on the reservation system.
The regulation,
Yeah, so we had, built by a volunteer, we had a reservation system that served the park pretty well for about 15 years, but it crashed on us last year, and it was right at a horrible time because when we were accepting the reservation request. So about 70% of the backcountry campsites get reserved in advance, and most of the demand really is on the Wonderland Trail. So we've seen a significant increase in demand for the Wonderland Trail over the last several years. A lot of great articles. If you've ever hiked it or ridden it, it's a phenomenal, trail system. And just an incredible public asset. So you understand why people are interested in doing. They should be interested in doing that trail. But we can't meet the demand. So we take reservations in advance for up to 70% of the opportunity, and we keep 30% available for people that walk in the door. And the backcountry staff does a tremendous job of working with people to put trips together for them. But that reservation system collapsed on us last year, just as we were accepting the reservations, and people were faxing them in. And we're getting 2,500 of these faxes, coming in. But the system crashed, so we weren't able to it wasn't stable, and we weren't able to grant reservations. So it all went to walk-in last year. And it worked pretty well. But we had nights last year that we've never had, where we had every backcountry camp in the park full. And that's been something new. So it's just, again, increased interest and demand, not just in the Wonderland, but I think in trails and backcountry camping, which is good. Anyway, so just a lot of interest in it. We have a reservation system that will, so what we've been able to do, we're trying to build a new online system, and we're about halfway there right now. It's actually proving to be a lot more complicated than one would think. We worked with grad students out of the University of Washington High School, so that was their project. And they helped us get us about halfway there, so we're trying to create a new online system, kind of mirrored after one at Canyonlands National Park. But again, we're still actually having to contract to finish this thing because it's, as they said and others have said, well, this is more complicated than I thought it would be. Of having the flexibility to manage changing conditions at these campsites and 40 different campsites, multiple different capacities and all variations and all of those things, different trailheads restart, different start dates, different length trips, on and on and on. But we're about halfway there. Tomorrow is when the reservation system, we start accepting reservations at 9 o'clock in the morning, so March 15th. But it's an online system, and I just got a chance to test it a couple of days ago, and so you'll go into the park's webpage, and you can enter your reservation system. You get an immediate response by email. So one of the park staff created this Google form to do this part of it. And then after we've collected the reservation requests over the next couple of weeks, it's a random process that assigns them. So you pick the first one and you assign them what they want, and you keep working down the list until you can no longer accommodate anyone else. And it really amounts to about 1,200 permits that you can give out on the Wonderland Trail in particular to meet that. But anyways, we've got a solution this year. We backed it up so we don't find ourselves. I spent about a month talking to people and trying to explain why the reservation went down, and getting calls from Secretary Jewell's staff and getting calls from Senator Cantwell's staff, and they all had friends who were trying to get permits. So, you know, it's a very small group of people that are actually using that service, but it is an important one for people. If you're trying to plan a trip, you know, particularly if you're spending a bunch of money to travel.
You're talking about an increase in visitation. You also mentioned that there was a 3-mile traffic backup last August. Are you doing anything with that shuttle concept anymore?
We operated shuttle during that construction period at Paradise when we were working on the Paradise Inn, because the contractor took over the entire upper lot at Paradise. So we lost that. So we added the shuttle as a mitigation. They're expensive to operate. We have actually done transportation studies. We've had consultants that have worked with us. And we're actually trying to get planning funding right now to start working on the Nisqually corridor to Paradise and talk about what are our options to manage visitor use. And really, I think we're going to need to have a discussion with the public, with you and others that care about the park and use it, about how many people should we have at Paradise on a given day. I really think we're going to have to establish a carrying capacity and manage to that. Transportation system could be part of that, whether it's a bus shuttle. Very expensive to operate. But I think the larger question is trying to address that really hard one I think that parks struggle with is how many people should be there, because you don't want those long lines that, you know, I think we can mitigate that. Some of that is through information to help people make good choices. I think those are passive ways of helping people make good choices so they don't find themselves stuck in a long line and being frustrated not being able to find a place to park. So you can help people, I think, with that. But beyond that, Rainier is a park, I think, like many that have kind of struggled to deal with congestion on summer weekends, mid-July, you know, through Labor Day, and I think the park's going to have to address that.
Do you envision a time, perhaps not in the too distant future, where maybe 5 miles from the park, 10 miles from the park, there are electronic signs that, you know where I'm going with that?
I do, yeah, and we've talked about that, and Verizon is actually installing a tower outside of Ashford right now. You know, so how do you provide good current information to people about current conditions? Most people, you know, our surveys are showing most people are getting a lot of information online before they ever leave home. So you want to make sure you're providing good information there about what people can expect. You're trying to manage people's expectations. Right. Again, if you choose to come on a Saturday at 1 o'clock in the middle of August, just expect that you're going to have lines. And at sunrise at White River, we're stopping the traffic when the parking lot is full. There's no other places to put people and metering people in. We have not done that at Paradise because of the Paradise Valley Road and some of the other overflow options that exist there, but you know, it has people parking a mile away from Paradise down a hill, you know, and so I think, again, they're challenging issues, I think, facing it, because they belong to the public. You don't want to restrict people's access, but you also need to sustain a good experience for people, and you want to make sure there aren't more people than the trails can accommodate or the restrooms, you know, or the facilities are designed for. And I do think we've got some information and recommendations, some of it from visitor surveys, and we're trying to get funding now to actually go out and do a public planning process to kind of address that question, I think, really of how many people are an appropriate number to make sure you're providing a good experience in a place, and then how do you manage to do that? And those are tough. Those are hard.
Right. Yeah. Is there one or two more questions?
I have one.
In the back. Then you.
I think you already addressed this, but could you just explain to me what the intentions are for the West Side Road? Thanks.
The questions about West Side Road, it was, you know, intended to circumnavigate the mountain when it was initially started. And I think ran out of money. World War II happened, et cetera, but tremendous work. You know, if you've been in there, that was done by CCC, just incredible work. I mean, beautiful structures that they built in there. But it's had a recurrent history of flood damage, particularly at the Homa Creek. There was a campground there at one point and other trails. But, you know, up until the mid-'80s, until '88 or early '90s, when it was closed permanently, the upper road, there were, I understand, about 50,000 people a year going up there hiking. So those are, for the most part, people that aren't getting there now today. So tends to concentrate people in fewer places in the park as well. We are maintaining administrative access there, so you can drive to Dry Creek, and I think encouraging people to hike, to ride bikes, to do that. The difficulty is we're actually asking, we have a geomorphologist and a geologist in the park, and we've had grad students doing work looking at the stability of that Tahoma Creek system that took out the road and periodically takes it out again, and asking whether or not that's stabilized, because we had damage in 2006, which is when the significant flooding happened all around the park. And we had a bit more a year or two after, but then we had a period of years where it was relatively stable. And then in 2015, we had glacial outburst flood. So these are things that happen during hot weather, August, September, and so it's a huge release of water that gets dammed up behind these glaciers, the Tahoma Glacier, and it took out part of the road then. So, but I have asked our geologists and geomorphologists, I said, to give a recommendation. Would it be safe, ideally, my preference would be to try to open that road to some public vehicle use for maybe a period of time in the summer if you could safely do it. I don't think the risk is so much that people would get caught in a flood event. Again, you can avoid the fall, you can avoid the spring, you can avoid the monsoon seasons, I think, in events. You could close it temporarily if you thought you were going to have a big storm. But I think the risk factor there is these glacial outburst floods, that are still occurring. And some of it has to do with the condition of the glacier, and has it receded enough, and has it changed in nature? It gets on a steeper slope, I understand. Might have diminished probability of having that kind of event, but you don't want to have 150 cars. I'd like to open it to Round Pass personally. 150 cars at Round Pass and then lose a road. Big problem. And again, I don't think it's the likelihood of someone getting swept away, all that could happen. I don't know if you saw the video. It happened in 2015, and a couple of people were hiking up there, and they got some great footage, which our geologists are excited about. Everybody's saying, you shouldn't be there, you shouldn't be there, you shouldn't be there. Because they're filming the river come up and all this logs and material and debris being carried downstream, and so they probably were where they shouldn't be, and there is that potential of somebody getting caught in that. But I think, so it's a risk analysis. Has it changed such that you can provide access up there? I don't know. Again, I'd like to think we could do it, but the problem is these glacial outburst floods.
Question down here.
Is there any particular knowledge or skills you need to volunteer?
No, I think, what we try to do with volunteers now is identify the opportunities and the needs. And if you have particular skills or knowledge, you certainly would take advantage of that. We have people doing almost everything imaginable at the park. We have volunteers that go out and help people that break down in their cars or lock their keys in their car. It's called roadside assistance. So we have volunteers that break into cars, how much fun can you have in a park, But we have volunteers that are working in our curatorial facility right now. We have volunteers on the visitor center desk, issuing permits, providing information to backcountry patrols, a lot of trail work, a lot of meadow restoration. We're also doing citizen science, butterfly monitoring, plant phenology studies, so you're using people to go out and take measurements and data that we use to track what's happening in the park. But we're also trying to make sure it's something that you want to do, that you're physically able to do and interested in doing so. I think we have a lot of meadow rovers that we use at Paradise and Sunrise, and they're hugely important because they're providing information to people that are coming, but they're also reminding them why it's important to stay on the trail here in these subalpine areas. And so we have a big cadre of people that do that, And then there's a whole group of Nordic Patrol people that are up there working this time of the year, again, trying to provide good information to people and help them stay out of trouble, keep them out of avalanche areas, and or people that just kind of lose track of where they're at and tell them how to get back to the parking lot. So lots of different ways you can help. I'll be happy to talk to you more. You can go online and look at our public webpage. It's mps.gov, nationalparkservice.gov/MORA. Mount Rainier is the naming convention for the park. And you can find a volunteer place and we'll tell you and talk about some of the opportunities. But no, we welcome it. Again, it's a park that doesn't function without volunteers. And it's really cool because what it is, I've come to think of it not so much the work you get done, but it's a very rich experience for people to be part taken care of. something that belongs to them, and they want to give back to. So to me, the real power in the volunteer experience is what people gain. Again, we gain a lot as a park, we can't function without it, but I think people find they get a lot out of this, because it's your fun.
One last question here. During the summer, you have, I don't know if there are a combination of amateur and professional astronomers with
Yep.
telescope up there. Is
Yep.
that a pretty popular program?
It's gotten to be very popular. We had several hundred people some nights this summer. So those are
Just break that
volunteers.
briefly, what is that all about?
Well, they work out of Paradise,
Yeah.
and so, right before dark, they'll gather by the visitor center, and so these programs are announced, and you can go online at the webpage and get updated information on the programs that are being provided at the park at any given time of the year. And yeah, these are volunteers by and large. One was a retired FBI agent. They're just people that have a real keen interest and a lot of knowledge about astronomy, and so a good example of how people can take their passion. May not be what they did for a living, but you can share that passion with other people.
Well, you
as
said
well.
100 people, so
Oh, we've
they're-
had 200 to 300 people, and so they set up telescopes.
so there are multiple telescopes
Yeah, yeah.
at a session.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of discussion, but it's a lot of looking and giving people an
Yeah,
opportunity.
so everybody has a chance to,
Yeah, gotta pick a clear night.
yeah, clear night.
Yeah, one of them took a picture that became a postage stamp.
That's right.
Incredible. I just saw it a couple months ago. Matt
Yeah,
Peter had
it was one of the 10 or so that were selected for the 16 maybe, I think, for the National
Yeah,
Park Service.
it's one of those
16.
beautiful photos I've ever seen.
We had a dedication event for that with the Postal Service at Paradise Inn last June. Yeah, really cool. Beautiful, yeah.
Okay, we need to wrap this up, but I want to thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Steve.
I want to thank the audience. You have hung in here, and hopefully this has been informative. We're very fortunate to have a national park in our backyard and incredible people up there managing it. So, thank you again.
It's my privilege. Thank you, and thank you, everyone, too.
Thank you.
Steve, do you want to announce the next one?
The next one is going to involve a lady who lives in our midst. Some of you may know Claudia Simpson-Jones. Claudia was an entertainer in Las Vegas. She's also the conductor of the Olympia Chamber Orchestra, which is about a 50-piece orchestra. She, as an aside, when she was involved in a club in Las Vegas, had a band, and they had to fly, and eventually she got her pilot's license, and then that morphed into her becoming a major airline pilot, and not just a pilot, she was a captain, and she met her husband, who was the co-pilot working for the airline, and she lives here in Yelm, and you're going to hear some amazing stories about her life. And so I hope you're able to come to that. And these interviews are all about meeting people who make a difference in our watershed, and also people who are very interesting. And believe me, I think this could probably go on for the next 40 or 50 years. There are a lot of interesting and amazing people in your midst. And it's fun hearing more about them. So, thank you again.
Thank you very much.